Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Chris Trico, Chief Operating Officer of VergX. I'm here for another episode of Behind the Scenes. I'm joined today by Derrick Havis, the president of Access One, one of the leading UCaaS technologies out there in the market. Derrick, first off, really excited to be joined by you today and very excited for this conversation. Before we kick it off, you and I met first time ever in Vegas. I wish I would have won bigger in Vegas. I always complained about having to go back to Vegas, as most of us always do those, the industry shows. And now, as we're both sitting in our home having this conversation, we're probably thinking, when are we going to travel again? Part of the questions I'll be asking today. But before we get started, I'd really love for the audience to get to know you. If you could give a little bit about your background, what you've been up to, how you got here, and then a little bit about Access One would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Always happy to do these, and always a pleasure to talk with you, Chris. Sure. I've been in the business now, I think going on 23 years, which is hard to imagine. But I think the timing of that has been beneficial to my career, right? We just started selling internet services when I got in the business, and our lives have changed completely as consumers, as business people, and certainly as people who sell technology to our clients. It has been an amazing evolution, and fortunately, my career has pretty much spanned the start and stop of it, right, to where we are today. That's a tremendous advantage to have learned it all through the process and have seen it all change. It's always good to be able to understand the old technologies and the foundation blocks that build to where we are today. And now we're a voice over IP society, and technology has become such an integral part of every business's backbone and operations. I've spent my entire career for the most part in sales, including running some small businesses and things like that, where I've got the background from the operations side, the engineering side, and the finance side. So 3 years ago, I joined Access One. Worked leading sales and marketing for some of the other competitors in Chicago for many years. And when I joined Access One, the primary reasons were they were a mature UCaaS shop, and we're getting more and more mature every day on the managed IT practice side of the portfolio. So I saw that where the future of the business was going, and wanted to jump in with an organization that had to continue the transition from being a telephone company, which is what Access One started out with 27 years ago, to UCaaS, to managed IT, and everything in between, whether it be SD-WAN or software and everything that's going on as the technology constantly changes. So at Access One, starting off as a telephone company and making that evolution, today we are primarily a UCaaS and managed IT shop. We still handle some of that carrier backbone for our clients, but really it is all about getting deeper in the stack, managing help desk, managing security, asset protection, and things like that, along with UCaaS and SD-WAN. That is really the backbone of what we provide our clients today.
So that, first off, that's really interesting. I love that you touched on a couple of things where I'm going. Obviously, SD-WAN is a question that I'll definitely be asking you about, but yeah, you brought up the managed IT and the transition of the organization. I feel like a politician writing down my notes for a response, but I've got a couple of things to bring up on that one. But you start off in sales. You said you got the finance background. You got the operations background. One of the challenges, I should say, that I have is that you lead the operations, but it's all about revenue. It's all about growing the company. It's all about that growth, maintaining the health of the internal team and the external partners that you work with, and then obviously customer first approach. But how have you kind of leveraged that background in sales to ultimately be a more effective leader now? Because you've got a lot of other departments now to worry about, and there's always some sort of friction between ops and sales, and probably the sales engineers in between them. So how have you leveraged that experience?
Well, I think it started off when I was just in sales. I mean, it's one thing, our job primarily is to find opportunities and then get that document signed. But I've always been a believer since the very first sale I made that the salesperson's responsibility doesn't stop or end with signing that client. nobody makes money until that thing is installed, the client's happy. And then with technology, especially, you're always looking to maintain that relationship and understand their business further and further, because there's additional technology building blocks to be sold to the client, right? So I was always heavily involved with the project management teams or provisioning or engineering to make sure that not only did the initial sale go well, but we were building out a roadmap for that client where you could get additional sales in the future. And I think that's kind of what helped tee me up to be able to be responsible for all parts of the business. I think the sales folks know best on what the clients are looking for and that experience. Sure. We're not really a product driven organization. We're a people driven organization. And it's about the experience that the client receives that makes for a long-term partnership, right? We don't want to be their vendor, we want to be their partner. And I think that experience and looking at it from that standpoint, even as a salesperson, has allowed me to understand both how to navigate other parts of the organization. Companies got to make money. The deals have to be profitable. So understanding that from the finance side as a salesperson is important as anything else. And so I think that entire attitude toward building a long-term partnership with a client and understanding that it begins with sales, but it doesn't stop once the ink is dry. And I think that's good advice for anybody in sales, but it's also allowed me to understand the other aspects of the organization and, end up really leading the entire organization and showing that it takes a village, everybody from the sales operations and the salespeople to the engineers, provisioners, and billing at the end of the day to make for a happy client experience. And I think that's key.
No, I hope people listening heard the whole people-driven, mentality and just the mindset. I've said things that we're a people-first, profit-second organization, and if you have that type of mentality, good things are going to happen. Relationships are going to be leveraged. But I do think it's, a good point that you're making, which is, every touch point in the organization needs to be on point. Right? Whether it's the sales, it's the accounting, because a customer doesn't want to have a bad experience when they have to go pay for a service. The account management, everything in between. And I always come back to somebody told me, during studies, is this whole cathedral mentality, right? Are you just laying brick? Are you building a wall, or are you part of something a little bit bigger, which is hopefully a cathedral that you're, working together? So that resonates a lot with me. I hope, entrepreneurs and other folks that are listening to this, business leaders, salespeople, everybody through and through, get what you just said, because that is definitely part of your secret sauce and, something that I've observed over time with you. So let's talk about managed IT, because you said, from, internet to VoIP to UCaaS to managing all the technologies end to end. Was it maybe there's a few questions all in one, but was it a conscious migration into a managed IT product or service? Or as you started to sell these products, was the customer touch point getting a little closer and you said, let's wrap around that managed service? How did you get there? And then knowing that this is a bigger component, how are you developing that practice?
Sure. Well, I think the answer is yes to all of your questions, right? It's kind of a combination of all of the above. Number one, as the technology evolved, it all started integrating and touching each other, right? So, back in the day when I first started selling Nortel, for instance, you know what I mean? You had voice services, and maybe you had some internet services, and then you had a phone system back in your closet, which didn't trust your internet backbone or your data backbone, but it touched the voice backbone. And then voice over IP came about. So now all of a sudden it's all integrated. And then, now we've got soft phones on laptops. So you're talking about that integration. You're talking about the collaboration tools. Things like video that we're on today. The technology itself, now it's all integrated. And so although it was a conscious choice, knowing that's where we're going, it was really a conscious choice based on the evolution that if you didn't start understanding the rest of the IT platform that the customer was on, you weren't going to be very good at delivering the one service that integrated with the rest. And so now especially when you look at the modern workplace today, with where we're all in this crazy world, it's all completely integrated. And now it's not only integrated at the user level, but it's not behind the firewall and the brick walls of the office anymore. We're all out at our basements and our coffee houses and hotels, whatever, doing work. And so that conscious choice to be able to provide that service, and more importantly, the long-term roadmap from the clients, right? They may be have budget and be in the market to buy X, but they don't realize that it now sits on top of an infrastructure that can't handle it. And so technology is always the weakest link in the chain to, impacts the service. So if you don't understand all of those pieces along the way, and frankly can deliver them at that level, then you're not going to be successful in delivering your client outcome.
Right. That's exactly right. I agree with where you're at and where you're going. So you did talk a little bit about kind of the voice aspect, data aspect, managed service. When we think about that, and now you've got this SD-WAN product in the mix, you've had voice providers that have historically separated voice and data, and now you're effectively sitting at that edge, right, where the data is happening. How have you taken SD-WAN to market, and how has that been a part of your growth story from both UCaaS and also the managed IT?
Well, and I think it just gets back into the carrier revolution, right? I mean, back in the day, we were selling point-to-point T1s and VPNs and things like that, and then that became MPLS. But as our clients with multi-locations, as their needs have changed, having an MPLS backbone with a single provider, doesn't provide redundancy, and also can provide budgetary concerns depending on where all your locations are at. So as SD-WAN has become more and more prevalent, the ability to get faster, cheaper internet connections and potentially multiple internet connections at a single location brought together through the SD-WAN experience provides a much more stable and redundant platform to be able to drive this. Add to that the cloud adoption, right? You no longer have your Microsoft server at the office and all of these things. All of that is being pushed into the cloud, which is more important than ever before since we're not in the office. You're reaching all your applications via the internet as well. So the internet is no longer just something to surf the web and get email. It actually becomes the primary platform that you are accessing everything our employees need to do their day-to-day jobs. And SD-WAN perfect complementary component to layer onto that, to control the quality, to control the backup versus the primary and all those things. I mean, it's just a natural progression in the carrier side of access as we're trying to get to all the applications that are now being driven over the internet instead of in a closet in your office with a bunch of servers.
Yep. No, and you were talking about where you guys started with internet and then VoIP, and I was on behind the scenes conversation with somebody else, and what we talked about was this whole mantra of communicating where you want, when you want, how you want. But what we've also seen with this pandemic is now the edge, or that branch, or that company office has really extended now into people's home. So being able to control the applications, which a lot of them are being delivered by Access One and critical apps such as voice, real-time communication, being able to leverage SD-WAN both from a managed standpoint, a network standpoint, but then ultimately utilizing it to deliver that high-quality service you're doing today, I think is really differentiating, really interesting, and I know you've had a lot of success in this market. So couple more questions. I really appreciate you making the time. What is a technology, or which technologies are you keeping your eye on that you're excited about or we should be on the lookout for?
Well, it's certainly not anything that's not front and center for all of us today, right? But with the pandemic, with all of us being at home, obviously the explosion of Teams is something that has been just crazy in the marketplace. Fortunately for us, our core, many years ago, we chose Meta as the backbone to our core for our UCaaS driver, for a lot of our voice applications. And as we all know, Microsoft purchased Meta not too long ago. I think with the idea, I don't know that they were predicting, a worldwide pandemic. If they were, wow, kudos. But I think that's one of the things with the integrations that allow us to have our clients access Teams at a little cleaner with the Meta kind of playing that go-between and us delivering that service. Again, we were a Microsoft shop already and handling a lot of the cloud adoption and applications. And so that's one of those things that's not a surprise, but it's one of the things we're very excited about, to be able to drive those applications and that experience to the end user, especially with all the collaborative needs now that we're at home, now that basically everyone's at home. So that's one of the things that's excited. But I think it's more about just it's the packaging of all those things, right? It's handling that down to the we say from the desktop to the cloud is what we try to handle for our clients. And now we're managing that desktop, and we are the help desk, and we are the asset protection, and those folks who, depending on where they were in their cloud migration strategy, are certainly speeding that up based on this environment. So I think it's the combination of all of those things and being able to package it up and deliver a really good experience for each employee end user at the client side, while still looking at the overall roadmap strategy of where they're trying to go, and frankly, preparing them for something like this again. There were certain companies who were able to send their employees home and were able to remain fairly productive. Others were dead in the water because they were so far behind in their infrastructure or their technology roadmap that, if we think this is the last time anything like this is going to happen again, I think we'd be fooling ourselves. We got to learn from history. And so the ability to handle all of those things. One of the other hot topics right now is borderless security. It was fine when we were all behind the corporate firewall. Now, we're working off of a Comcast modem or an AT&T modem, and the security levels just aren't the same in our at-home environments, on top of the fact that we're sharing with our remote children's education path. And our spouse's work environment, who's also home as well. So that's where SD-WAN can come in, and a lot of these other applications to make that as a seamless experience as possible for our employees to be productive at home.
So first off, I agree. Security is a massive topic. You've had this uptick in security now that, to your point, it's extending past the corporate firewall, and now you've got these remote employees at home, and I know you've got a really unique home product that you push into the space there, and your VPN as a service and all that good stuff. So I know you're going to meet the requirement and the demand and just the overall pain point that is now center and in front of us. But you and I spoke before the pandemic really took off. Really leaned in and became this global pandemic. It was still, hey, what's going on? And we were both just unsure. And at that point, amongst us friends having a conversation, you were looking at the business and saying, where do I need to be? I mean, you had this, foresight to see what was, going to happen or what you need to be. But my question to you is, we talked before the pandemic really was a pandemic. It was just an uncertainty. Now we're, living in it, and there's not a clear end in sight, but we've come across, how do we manage it? How do we live through it? What's our day-to-day look like? And what I've always observed is you've got a really interesting culture at Access One. Even when you were the sales leader, now being the overall top dog, how have you maintained culture inside of Access One, with what we're dealing with now?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to communication. I think one of the things that we don't realize is, what did we lose by being at home, right? You no longer have that. I'm a big one of always just keeping a temperature check of everything going on in the organization. You rarely find me sitting at my desk in the office when we were pre-COVID, right? I'm one that likes to talk to the folks and stop by different departments and check with the department head while grabbing a cup of coffee. And so you lose some of that dialogue and some of that communication. You bring it back to something as simple on the sales side, right? You'd be meeting one of your sales folks out to run a customer appointment or presentation, and you'd get there 15 minutes early. You'd kind of game plan in the parking lot. You'd talk about the players at the table from the client side. And then when you were done with the presentation, same thing, right? You'd be in the parking lot for 15 minutes, kind of data download how it went, cut up the takeaways to see who was following up on this and who was responsible for that. And that no longer existed. And it took a while in this pandemic before we realized that we forgot about that communication and how important that is. Even if it's walking back to your office after a meeting in a conference room, the CFO and I would be kind of chit-chatting still about what just happened in that meeting. And a lot of times that 5 minutes would tie a bunch of things together. And now because of all the videos, and we're not in the car and we don't have walk time literally in the office, you're just going back to back to back to back, and you never actually kind of close and wrap up that gap with those things. So communication is essential for just getting the job done, but more importantly, along with the culture side, right? We find our meetings of our teams are meeting more often, even if it's for shorter periods of time, just to kind of do check-in points. And then you try and get creative. I know that I don't know, it was about 2 weeks ago, we had a management contest trivia thing where, we used the technology to break up into a bunch of teams, and somebody kind of facilitated it. And we got to have a little competition and a little fun just being together. You know what I mean? Because you do miss that, as nice as it is for employees to, not have to sit in traffic, which is a thing here in Chicago a lot of times, and do the commuting. Although that's a great benefit, I think there's a psychological miss that we have from not being around your coworkers in the socialization part of the environment, which has a lot to do with culture. So I think you got to be creative. I think you got to just make sure that both at the management level and then at the leadership level that you're communicating, and whether it's email, getting on video, whatever, it takes more communication because you don't realize how much of it is missing just in your normal day-to-day interaction.
That's a great point. And actually, I was even thinking about the little post-meeting, pre-meeting sync-ups, and you're right. There is a lot of that interpersonal connection that's happening. And it has been a lot of that back-to-back meeting structure, whether it's internal or external. So I'm going to take a little bit of that internally and see what we can do there. If my team gets annoyed at having too much FaceTime with me, I'm going to point them in your direction. They can join your team. So one last question. I believe you're doing a lot of amazing things. I've enjoyed our relationship. I've enjoyed when you ran the sales team. I really like seeing your growth and just building that relationship with you. If you heard the market speaking about you, and this could be Access One, what are you looking to hear them say about you if you overheard that conversation?
And as weird as it sounds, like, we're in this business, right? Because technology breaks. I mean, that's just a fact, right? And so it's not when it breaks, it's what happens when it does. Now, if you engineered correctly up front, and if the client's on the right idea with the roadmap, I mean, you can engineer these things to be as minimally impacting as possible, right? The cloud does a lot of that for you, and with redundancy, SD-WAN can do some of those things. But really, it's about when things go bad one way or the other, who are you calling? And do you have confidence in the fact that they are going to be able to bring the right resources to bear in order to make sure that's fixed, even if it's something that's not primarily your responsibility as their IT provider? The entire business now runs over IT, right? So whether it's, employees' productivity at home and their ability to do their jobs, it's an IT issue typically. And so, the thing that I would be thrilled if what they're talking about us is that we're that partner not only on the front end that has the expertise and the engineering ability to put them on the right path for their organization, not just using technology, but looking at the business outcomes that they want to achieve. It's less now about the technology and more about what is your business doing and where are you going? And then you bring technology guys in to put the technology in to achieve your business goals. So I'd like to not only be thought that we have the right folks on the front end to do it properly, design it, and meet the business needs for the particular business, but when a pandemic hits or when something else happens, you also have the trust that, you trust us to be able to come in and do what's needed to keep you operational, both short run and long run. And then finally, we've got a couple of really smart guys on staff that try to keep us ahead of the technology. And so it starts in the beginning and then it kind of in the middle. And then are you always evolving and educating yourself on what customers are asking for tomorrow and being prepared to deliver it?
Right. I just said, I thought that was a great answer. I've talked to a lot of people. That's one that I couldn't agree more with, because not only, and I say this in our own company and where we're at, is it's great to sell on the feature functionality and the bells and whistles and the razzle dazzle, but at the end of the day, to your point, things do go wrong. Technology is technology, and being able to effectively address it quickly and learn from it, adjust, and keep on going. I think that was a fantastic answer. It really shows exactly why you are a leader in this space. I thank you for joining me today on another episode of Behind the Scenes. For everybody who missed the intro, that is Derrick Havis, the man, the myth, the legend, president of Access One, all around great guy, great company. Reach out to him if you have any questions or want to talk further. This is, again, Chris Derrick, Behind the Scenes. Derrick, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thank you.